Alright, so now we are going to focus on our next visual, which is we are going to focus on something what we call as bubble plots. Alright, so when we are learning about bubble plots, right, the things that we need to understand is basically we have three measurable things. If we realize in scatter plot previously, right, we only have x and y like this, right? But in scatter plot we have the third measurable things which normally come in different intensity, which in this case in the perspective of shape. Alright, so let's try to see what happen if it is in scatter plot. Alright, so in scatter plot, by right we have x and y, profit ratio and sales as example, right? And we have the scattered all over in the scatter plots. Alright, so that is scatter plot. But then in bubble plot, what we are going to have is each of these mark can actually represent something, and in bubble plot the size for each of these mark, right, each of all of these mark actually can represent something. So what is it represent is basically in this context is unit sold, meaning that the higher the unit sold, the bigger the size of the circle, the lower the unit sold, and the smaller the size of the circle. So if I click this one, this is what it means. So each of the subcategories, right, we can see this one, ink and toner, the size is bigger a bit compared to the rest of other things because the number of units sold is higher compared to the other subcategories. In this case here, right, the reason why we cannot see any labels is because they are intersected from one and another. There are actually three. If I'm not mistaken, there are actually three in here. So because of they are this section, right, intersected between one and another, they have no space to put the label. So that is the reason why we do not have any label for this one. Alright, now let's go to the next thing, which is we are going to learn how can we create the bubble plot. Alright, so let me just do this thing first. Alright, so this is our empty sheet over here, right? So the very first thing is basically we can put columns and row first. In this case, we will just put cost and sales. I'm not sure if there is any cost and sales here. Okay, there is. So we'll just put cost and sales in here, right? Cost and sales in here. So what we are going to have right now is we are going to have a scatter plot between sales and cost. Alright, now the second thing is basically this one, they are using subcategory. If you remember in our previous lesson, right, when we are doing this scatter plot, we don't really put subcategory, we put order ID. Alright, but we need to understand again, the reason why we did scatter plot last time is to find the relationship between all of the orders and number of sales as well as cost in Australian dollars, right? So if I put the order ID in here, right, the order ID in here, we are going to have this one, but we have to understand one context as well. So the number of scattered here is depends on how many order ID do we have, right? If we have 1000 order IDs, then we are going to have 1000 scattered. Alright, so for the purpose of visualization right now, we are not going to use order ID, we are going to use subcategories in detail over here. So if I'm not mistaken, there are around 12 subcategories. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So because of there are 12 subcategories, right? So it's only have 12 scattered in here or 12 marked in here. So in order to differentiate between one and another subcategories, I think it's good for us to put subcategories into color so that each of the subcategories can have its very own color. Alright, now we are at the second step. Now let's go to the third step. The third step is we wanted to identify the size, the third measure, which is the profit into the bubble plot. So what does it mean is when we put bubble plot in here, right? Sorry, when we put profit in the bubble plot in each of the scattered, what is it mean is the bigger the size of circle, the bigger the profit is, and the smaller the size of the circle, the lower the profit is. So now, in order to change the size of this one, right, we can put some profit into size over here. So if we go over here, in order to make sure each of this one do have a different size, right, what we can do is we can just take profit AUD and we can put in size over here. So what we can see here, what we can see over here, the size is different a bit, only a bit, because this one is not done yet. So in order to make it even more obvious, you can go to size here, you can increase the size, right? So now we can start to see there are certain circle bigger than another circles, right? I mean, I'll just make it like this. This one is good enough. As example, this one, right, this one is smaller because the profit is only 0.06 million. Meanwhile, this one is bigger because the profit is 0.48 millions. So there is a lot of difference, right? So that is the reason why some circle is bigger than one another. So this is our bubble plot technically, but this bubble plot is not good enough because we do not know what is this, or what is this, right? Even the color is not good enough. Now, sorry, not the color, I think the shape. So how can we make some customization? The very first thing is you can just go to shape, right? Shape here, right? We wanted to add fill colored. So you go to shape, and then you click this fill circle. Then only we have the whole fill circle. Now it looks better a bit. Now, in order to make it even more better, I think it's good for us to reduce the opacity a bit. Alright, because normally for a bubble chart, the opacity is reduced so that we can see this this overlaps from one circle to another. Alright, so that is the very first thing for customization. Now the second thing is to make it even more clearer, right? I think it's good if we can put label for each one of this one. So how can we put label for each one of this one is basically we wanted to know what subcategory is this, what subcategory is this, without referring to the legend here and without having to hover to one by one, right? So in order to do that is basically we can put subcategories. Where is subcategories? Subcategories, and we can put it into label. Now we have each one of the labels. Alright, so I think that this one is good enough. But let's say if you wanted to see it more clearer for the purpose of this class, you can just put another label as well. So this one is about profit, right? We can just verify with profit and put at label, and we can see the smallest one. This one cannot see because this one is like overlaps and very small. This one is 0.06 m, which is very small, and this one is bigger a bit because this one is having higher profit compared to audio. So I think that's it for bubble plot. See you guys in the next video. Bye bye.